Hey everybody, welcome to the webinar today on using daily reports and cost codes and how to tip the balance in your favor. My name is Gordon Titus. I will be your host. You're all muted for the sake of sound quality. We'll have a question and answer section at the end of the webinar, but feel free to ask your questions throughout the webinar. We will be having someone on our end noting those questions, and we'll answer those. But to ask your questions, go to the GoToMeeting control panel or the GoToWebinar control panel and find the questions section and type your questions in there. Just a little bit about myself. I'm an enterprise solutions engineer with BusyBusy, which is a really long and fancy way of saying that I help people get started with the BusyBusy app. And my background is in construction. I started in the industry as a hod tender of all things, and it seems that hauling mud and stocking brick for ornery old masons didn't scare me off from the industry. I'm a licensed general contractor and construction tech aficionado with 10 years of experience total in the construction industry, but also 7 years of helping construction companies improve their businesses with technology. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. I'm passionate about so many of the discussions or so many of the topics that we discuss on these webinars, and this webinar is no different, or this topic's no different. If any of you have ever seen the film Moneyball, let me give you a little bit of background. You know that in 2002, general manager of the Oakland Athletics, Billy Beane, had a team that was at the bottom of the league. The A's had to make the most of their existing resources, and the way the story goes, Billy Beane, his back was against the wall, and he had to find players that would get on base and score. With the help of Peter Brand, a data analyst, the A's were able to pull together, Billy Beane and Peter Brand specifically, were able to pull together historical data on players from every division in Major League Baseball. Once they started to analyze the data and play the game based on who got on base, it absolutely changed the dynamic of the team, and they began to win. In fact, they actually had a record-setting season with 20 consecutive wins. Pretty phenomenal. It hadn't been done in almost 100 years. If we zoom out a little bit and look at the sports as a whole, there was a study done by ESPN comparing all teams in professional sports and analyzing which ones use data to their advantage and which ones do not. There's a common theme here. If you look at the teams that are at the top or near the top, and the teams that are near the bottom, any of you see a trend here? The top five, for example, the Astros won their first World Series last year after reworking their franchise in just a few years using data. The Spurs are considered one of the best franchises in sports by many, despite being located in San Antonio, which is one of the smaller markets in professional sports. The curse of the Bambino, if you all know what that is, was broken using data, and the Red Sox have been on a tear for 15 years, literally using the data practices that Billy Beane pioneered with the A's. In fact, at the end of the movie Moneyball, the Red Sox tried to hire Billy Beane from the A's. So what's interesting is that a lot of these teams on the left are big market teams. They have resources at their disposal, yet they don't win. And not only are they not winning, but oftentimes they're the butt of jokes. And I'm not going to make any here, but because you might be fans. But data here is the equalizer. In theory, there's no reason that the Spurs should be substantially better than the Knicks over the past 20 years, but here we are. Now, how do we relate this to construction? I'm going to give a quick shout out to the Contact Crew. If you've ever listened to their podcast, they're fantastic. If you haven't, you should check it out. But I'm going to reference one of their podcasts. Back in June, they interviewed Lonnie Crumpton with Faith Technologies. They're an electrical contractor that has learned from lean manufacturing. My mind was blown with this interview. I think you can watch the interview I think it's on YouTube. But to make a long story short, Lonnie described the way that they use data gathered from the field to be more profitable and more efficient. The information from the field has become actionable data that drives systematic change at the company level. And it's not just a reactionary mechanism on a project by project basis. As a result of their efforts, they've increased their productivity time, or what they call quote unquote primary time, from 39% to 64% in just 8 years. So let me repeat that again. They increased their productivity time, or their productive time, from 39% to 64% in just 8 years. So primary time, or productivity time, is in their world is time spent by an electrician at a wall installing stuff. So rough materials and finishes. So what does this? What's the largest variable on a job site? I think we all know that the largest variable is labor. If your project's going to go off the rails, it's going to be because of labor overruns, and whether that's just overtime or it's taken longer than you thought it was going to. That's where you're going to lose ground, if you're going to lose ground on the project typically. In construction, we're really good and you can see here, we love this construction triangle, and it's a great way of demonstrating the cycle of construction from estimates to estimate and completion of projects. So in the construction industry, we're really good at estimating and executing, but we tend to be poor at the evaluation phase, and we often overlook the evaluate portion for a good reason. We're too damn busy, and we need to get going to the next project. How many times do we get to the end of a season and finally have the time to look around and see that, dang, we didn't really make that much money this year, even though we were really busy. And it's often like we have the tiger by the tail, and that's not a fun place to be. So many times we get caught in that estimate, execute cycle, and forget to evaluate, or the evaluation comes too late to make the necessary adjustments on your projects. While we execute, we need to be collecting that job site data so that we can actually evaluate as we go. We need to look at that evaluate phase as not as something we do strictly at the end of a project or even at the end of a month, but as something we do on a daily basis. There's no neutral on projects. Every day you're either getting better, you're moving that needle, or you're moving backwards. And you guys know that. By adopting this practice of ongoing evaluation, it will lead to better business practices and sustainability, guaranteed. The estimating and execution cycle over and over can just strictly just estimating and executing can lead to disaster. So we've discovered that the information we need to make us more profitable, it already exists. We just have to find a way to harness that data and bring it into the office in real time. So just like Faith Technologies, um, you can have the data that you can use to make your processes better and become more efficient and profitable. Daily reports and job cost data are biggies. These days, however, they're with the help of technology, they're like a stream. You just have to tap into that stream, bring it into the office, and let it help you make your company better. So let me ask you a quick question. What would an increase in productivity of 64% look like for your company? That's incredible. So what if you went from 39% productive time, or wherever you're at, and you add another 25 or another 25 points to that? So a total of 64%. What would that look like for your company? What would so we're not well we're not so just to be clear, we're not talking about overhead. We're adding overhead. We're talking about using the current resources that you have and getting more done from the employees you have now. This is no longer a theory, by the way. This was proven by Faith Technologies, and that came, but it came from looking at the data objectively and making incremental adjustments along the way. Use the data that you gather to identify activities that you can profit from, and those that you don't profit from. Use it to identify your top performers, and then of course why they are your top performers, and finally identify the bottlenecks on your projects. So after owning the data for a while, Faith Technologies quote unquote accelerate group, who's charged with these improvements in their processes, used it to come up with a solution for eliminating certain bottlenecks confronting their electricians out in the field. They designed their processes around a mantra that they call 30-30, which means their installers are no further than 30 steps or 30 seconds away from what they need to get a job done. Job cost data, just like anything else, it's garbage in equals garbage out. There are definitely some best practices for getting more out of cost codes from the field, but you have to be diligent. So a couple of things to keep in mind. Don't use the data to micromanage your employees. You're just going to wear them out. And to be honest with you, too much of this stuff is going to take away from their primary activities or their productive time. Second, track the actual activities your guys are performing. Whenever I introduce the idea of cost codes to a new company that I'm working with, what I tell them is I say, okay, what services do you advertise on the side of your trucks or on your business cards? And then I let them know that those are the things that you need to be tracking as cost codes. How do you know that you should actually be advertising that? So keep that in mind. Cost codes, they tell the story. So when you use cost codes, know that they're going to tell you the story of how your projects went, and use them to learn. And of course, use cost codes to inform future estimates. It makes you more confident that you didn't leave any money on the table on that bid that you submit next week or tomorrow. Up to this point, I've talked about the hard data associated with cost codes, but I don't want to discount the daily report data that comes from the observations of your field personnel Having quality daily reports provides the color behind the cost code data, and by and large, however, the construction industry is still using paper to report information from the field. It takes me back to the days of triplicate daily reports and the smell of carbon, the carbon copies. I love it, but it's antiquated. The winds of change are blowing, though. We can see that you can see that that electronics and the apps are catching up. And the thing to remember here, though, is that technology is evolving alongside the construction industry, and the industry in turn is evolving in part because of technology. 15 years ago, the spreadsheet was the mightiest technology on a project, and I loved them, and secretly I still do. But today, the amount of automation is mind-blowing. So just like cost codes, though, daily reports, there are some best practices that you need to be aware of when doing your daily reports, or when selecting a daily report software or solution. You want to hear from your employees. They're your eyes and ears out on the job site. Their notes can provide color again and a description of what's happening. Also, there's the second part of this, or the second piece here, accurate enough for job costing. There's a happy medium here. You have to strike a balance between too much data and too little. It has to be at least accurate enough for the job costing, but it can't be so onerous that your guys won't do it. So strike that balance and test it out. You're going to get better over time, and as your processes evolve. The third thing, it's like the old saying: you don't know where you're going until you know where you've been. Knowing where you're going and knowing your budgets, or knowing what you've consumed as far as your budgets, is going to allow you to make better decisions. And when you have that ability to compare what you had planned and what you've already used up, is going to change the way you make decisions on the job site. The biggest question, however, which brings us to our next point, is, and it often goes unanswered a lot of times, it's, did we make money today? And that's probably one of the best things that you can hone in on. Again, that idea of being dragged through the year like holding on to a tiger's tail. If you don't know whether you made money today or not, you might just be a flurry of busy work and you didn't make any money. So keep that in mind. Know where you are, and if you don't know whether you're making money on a daily basis, you should. The technology and the abilities out there. Another biggie here, next point, is we have to document our safety efforts, and y'all know that there's OSHA's going to come look at your records if you need to prove that you've been safe, and so if you have whatever daily software or daily report software or solution that you get, it needs to have good, concise, and easily referenceable data or documentation for your safety. And next, everyone's favorite time of year can certainly be much easier with well-documented workers' comp codes. Those yearly audits from your insurance company are always fun, especially if you haven't been keeping track of those cost, or those daily, or those workers' comp codes. Find a solution that allows you to pull that up at any given time and report that. It's going to make your life so much easier. And then finally, photo documentation it's no longer considered an option in the industry. However, most companies' methods of organizing photos leaves a lot to be desired. They're usually on somebody's phone somewhere, and if something goes wrong, everybody's scrambling to find a photo that saves your butt. So keep that in mind, that if you pick a solution, it's got to have a central location for your photos that happens immediately. And if you're relying on guys to upload those photos and keep them organized for you, I guarantee it's going to get out of hand. You need it to do it for you. That brings us to the end of our webinar. So today's been, a real quick 20-minute webinar for you. Hopefully you got some good stuff out of it and something to think about. Again, I just want to thank the contact crew for bringing that fantastic podcast to us on Faith Technologies. But now we can take some of your questions. You can still ask some questions in the GoToWebinar control panel. Okay, so it looks like we've got a question from Manny. Manny asks, how do I get my guys to do their reports consistently? That's a really good question, and it's honestly, there are different ways to do it, but just like anything else that's new, it takes an initial thrust in the form of training, in the form of setting company policy. Put it in writing. It's got to be in writing. It's got to be clear cut, and then do that training. Do that training with those guys, and then from there, over the next month or so, and I say month because when I've worked with companies, it usually takes about a month to get people kind of humming along. But set those reminders and continue to remind them and make those little taps. Good question. Thank you. Are there any other questions? We'll give you just a second. Let's see. So it looks like we've got a question from Josh. He says, once I have the cost code data, what's the best software for organizing and reporting on that data? That's another good question. There are a lot of solutions out there. You really need something that has some project management functions in it. Some good ones are Sage, and Foundation is a really good one. Computer Ease has some great functionality. But basically anything that allows you to analyze the data or analyze the information at a project level, and then also across the projects and across time. Great question. If we don't have any other questions, just really want to say thanks for joining us. Please check out BusyBusy at busybusy.com and have a fantastic rest of your week. Until next time, be smart.